Good morning. It's Cheryl with Colchester Mill Fabrics and Quilting, and we're here day 7, November 27th of our 2023 Stuff Your Stocking event. Today is all about ironing. And if you know me or have been around the store long enough, you know me and irons are not a good thing. So I am definitely turning this demo over to Laura. She's going to explain our offerings today, and I'll step back in safely away from the iron and give you some pricing. There you go, Laura. It's all yours.
Thank you, Mrs. Claus. All right, so I think today's tools that we're going to show you are probably the most exciting and most fun tools here too. So first thing we're going to do that is a tool we use all the time in binding and also some other blocks I'll show you is the folded corner clipper ruler. The name of the ruler is longer than the ruler itself, but it's a great little tool for cutting off the angles for your binding, and also, as I mentioned, some other blocks here too. Once you've determined how many binding strips you need to cut, you're going to take your binding strips and you're going to stack them all right side up. While I'm getting this stacked, the reason I'm going to angle these is because a binding that is made with an angled or mitered attachment is really a stronger seam than if they're sewn end to end. So you're going to take as many strips as you can comfortably cut through, have them facing right side up. I'm going to take my ruler and just trim off the ends, and you'll notice on the folded corner clipper ruler some numbers and also some lines going across it. And these are registration lines to help us line it up with what we're cutting. I have 2.5-inch wide strips. I know this is upside down for you, but on my ruler, I'm going to put the blunt tip at the top. There is a 2.5-inch marking on the bottom, which will line up at the bottom of my strip. A little vertical line on the side of the ruler, so I have 3 places to line up my fabric strips. Cut my angle, and now my strips are cut at the correct angle to sew together. Nice 45-degree angle. I can attach these together and bring them right to my sewing machine. So with the blunt tips, it's also an aid for lining up, and they're cut at a perfect 1/4 inch when you go to sew them. So it's a great tool to use for cutting your binding strips. You can also use the tool to cut at the end when you go to attach the ends of your binding too. There is a great tutorial, as with all creative grid rulers. If you scan or take a picture of the QR code, it will bring you up to tutorials on how to use the ruler. Another way to use the ruler is for making flying geese. And I know we're getting away a little bit here from binding, but I just want to show you that this is a tool that is not one and done. There's going to be multiple uses for it. So if you have your base for your flying geese and what you're going to be putting in the corners, you can actually cut these, cut the angles before you sew them. Again, I have a blunt edge here, which is a 1/4 inch. I can pin it, bring it to my sewing machine, stitch that with a 1/4 inch, press it out, take my next side for my flying geese, line it up, take my ruler, line it up again along the top, the sides, and make that cut. And I'll also have my opposite angle ready to be pinned and ready to be sewn. So it's a nice tool for making flying geese there too. The other block that can easily be made using the folded corner clipper ruler is a snowball block. So typically in a snowball block, we start with a square and add a triangle to the corners. that you can sew first and then cut, but with the folded corner clipper ruler, you line up your outer edges, take your ruler, cut, and while leaving this in place, bring it to your sewing machine and you can stitch with an exact 1/4 of an inch. So it's a nice tool to know where your 1/4 of an inch seam allowance is. Once that's sewn, press it out and repeat in each of the other 3 corners there. Great tool. As I said, the name of the tool is longer than the actual ruler itself, but it is a great ruler to be used. So our next special for our binding day is pressing our binding. So these are great. It's a great tool for pressing it. Pressing binding, there is nothing fast about it. It's tedious, especially with your larger bed quilts here too. But what you would do is you would go and prepare all your binding strips, sew them together, and I'm going to show you a tool which really helps to make this process a little bit faster. So you're going to start by folding your binding, and you just want to, like you traditionally would, fold it in half, matching up your raw edges there. And next you're going to slip it through our binding ease. And what this does is it has 2 little slots that our binding strip is going to pass through. So I'm going to get it started. The binding ease is a silicone mat, so it's a great mat for storing your iron on. It is heat resistant up to 500 degrees. If you're using an Oliso iron, you can disengage so the feet are no longer popping up, and it's an iron that's going to store or stand nice and flat. So I have my binding started, and now all I have to do is slowly pull it through. It is passing underneath my hot iron, pressing it, giving it a nice crease. I have timed myself pressing bindings for, any size quilt, with and without this binding ease, and this is a real time saver. So as you're pressing, you're slowly pulling your binding through and under your iron. Just keep those raw edges matched. And even for a king size quilt, you will get this binding pressed in no time at all. Now I'm just going to go to the end of this strip here. If you have multiple strips, you're just going to attach them. You can press wider strips. These were cut at 2.5 inches, but you definitely could use a wider strip for your binding. Let me just put my feet back up on my iron. There you go. So our last tool that we're going to show you that is part of our special is the binding spool. And this is a great little device, great little holder for your binding strips. You can start by threading it through one of these little holes, kind of hold it in place, and it just wind your binding on here too. So this is a perfect size if your strips were cut at 2.5 inches wide. If they are cut a little wider, it'll just fold up a little bit at the ends here. But this binding spool can hold enough binding for a king size quilt. So now your binding is neatly pressed, organized. Bring it over to your sewing machine and you are ready to sew this on your completed quilt. All of these specials today, there is a special pricing for it, and I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Claus and she will go over that with you.
Thank you, Laura. Didn't Laura do a great job demoing all of these items? And wasn't it smart that I let her demo the hot iron and not me?
I have one more strip you could try, Mrs. Claus.
Oh no, that's quite okay, Laura. Bad elf getting me in trouble. Oh my gosh. All right, so for day 7, the folded corner clipper ruler, there we go, is $18. The binding ease, which we'll leave on the mat because I don't want to touch the hot iron, is $32. And the quilt binding spool, super
Little
sparkly,
bling.
lots of bling on it, is now $8. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to message us. Remember that pickups are starting on December 15th. We'll also start shipping on December 15th. If you order any one of today's items, you'll get entered into the drawing for one of three $300 gift certificates. And that's for any day. If you place an order, you get entered into the drawing. And if you spend $150 combined during the 12 days, you'll get a bonus $20 coupon to use for a future visit. And with that, we will see you tomorrow for day 8. Have a great day.